Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Aliens learn the hard way: never fight a human warship. The overconfident aliens, the Xian Empire, one of the most dominant and feared forces in the galaxy, had spent centuries expanding its rule, crushing weaker civilizations, and ensuring that no species dared to challenge their authority. Their warships, massive in size and armed with some of the most advanced weapons in existence, had never faced defeat in battle. To them, war was nothing more than a demonstration of their superiority, a reminder to the rest of the galaxy that resistance was futile. So when reports arrived that a single human warship had entered Xian-controlled space, the High Council of the Empire did not see it as a threat but rather as an insult, a foolish act of defiance that needed to be corrected. The very idea that a human vessel would dare intrude upon their territory without permission was laughable to the Xian leaders, and they saw no need for diplomacy or negotiation. To them, this was not a situation requiring strategy or caution, it was simply an opportunity to display their power once more. Seated in the command center of the Zifran battle cruiser Dread Talon, Admiral Xor, one of the most decorated military officers in the Empire, smirked as he watched the reports on the main display. His sharp reptilian eyes gleamed with amusement as he observed the lone human vessel, which appeared to be just sitting there, completely still, as though its crew had no idea of the danger they were in. "So, this is the best humanity has to offer," Admiral Sailor scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension, as he leaned back in his command chair. His long, clawed fingers tapped against the armrest. "A single warship venturing into our space alone. Either they are unbelievably foolish or they believe they stand a chance against us. Either way, this will be over quickly." "Perhaps we should send a warning," Admiral suggested. Captain Varric, his second-in-command, hesitated. Unlike the Admiral, Varric had studied human history and tactics more closely, and something about this situation did not sit right with him. "They have not attempted to communicate or retreat. What if this is some kind of trick?" Admiral Sailor let out a sharp, hissing laugh. "A trick from the humans? Please, Cap, do not give them more credit than they deserve. They are creatures of flesh and bone, weak and fragile. Their ships are primitive compared to ours. We have crushed civilizations far more advanced than they are, there is nothing they could possibly do that would surprise us." Confident in his superiority, the Admiral wasted no time in deploying 5 warships, each one capable of reducing an entire planetary defense force to dust. Their orders were simple: destroy the human vessel and leave no survivors. As the Xian fleet moved in closer, their weapon systems primed and ready, they could see the human warship more clearly on their displays. It was large, sleek, and heavily armored, but it still did not move. There were no signs of defensive maneuvers, no active energy signatures indicating that weapons were being prepared to fire, and no distress signals being sent out. It was as if the humans did not even care that they were about to be attacked. "They must be terrified," one of the Xian officers sneered. "Perhaps they are hoping that surrendering without a fight will spare their lives." "Fools," Admiral Culler muttered as he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Let us make it clear to them that there will be no mercy." Raising a clawed hand, he issued a simple command: fire a warning shot. A massive energy beam shot forward from the Xian flagship, slicing through the empty void of space and passing just meters away from the human warship's hull. The sheer power of the blast was enough to vaporize an entire city, and yet the human ship still did not move. Now even the most arrogant Xian officers were beginning to feel a sense of unease. "Why aren't they responding?" one of the tactical officers whispered, his voice laced with confusion. "They didn't even raise their shields." Captain Vlek's expression darkened as he turned toward the Admiral. "Sir, I strongly advise we reconsider our approach. Something is not right. No captain would leave their ship so defenseless unless—" "Enough of this paranoia, Varric. If they refuse to acknowledge our warning, then we will simply end this farce. Now, prepare to fire all weapons," the Admiral commanded. The Xian warships locked onto the human vessel, their main cannons humming as they powered up for a full-scale attack. The crew members of the Zeon fleet waited eagerly, fully expecting the human ship to be reduced to nothing but floating debris within seconds. But before the Zeon fleet could unleash their devastating attack, the human warship moved. It was not a slow, cautious movement, it was instantaneous, impossibly fast, as if the ship had simply disappeared from one spot and reappeared somewhere else. The Zeon had barely had time to process what had happened before their sensors went wild, alarms blaring across every warship as warning lights flooded their displays. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Zeon felt something they had never experienced before: fear. Panic spread through the Zeon fleet like wildfire. Their warships, some of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy, had just lost track of their target, something that should have been impossible. Admiral Kaller's sharp claws dug into the armrests of his command chair as he barked out orders. "Find them." "Where did they go?" The bridge officers scrambled to make sense of the readings. The human warship had moved at a speed that defied all logic. One moment it was in front of them, and the next, it was gone. The scanners were having difficulty locking onto its position, as if it were phasing in and out of reality. "Captain, it's behind us." Vlek's voice was tense as he studied the displays. Admiral Xor's eyes widened. He snapped his head toward the tactical display, and sure enough, the human warship had somehow repositioned itself directly behind their formation without any sign of movement, without any engine signatures, as if it had simply teleported. "Impossible!" Sailor roared. "No ship can move like that." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Then, for the first time since their encounter began, the human warship powered up its weapons. The Zeon fleet detected an energy spike coming from the mysterious vessel, and within moments, their ships were hit by a strange, invisible force. There were no bright laser beams, no missiles streaking through space, just a pulse that rippled through the void like a silent wave. The moment it hit, the Zeon ships shuddered violently, lights flickered, consoles sparked, and alarms screamed across the fleet as systems malfunctioned all at once. "Admiral," one of the officers shouted in alarm. "Weapons are down. Shields are fluctuating." His voice broke into a garbled mess as his screen turned static. Xor's fists clenched as he snarled, "What did they do to us?" Varric, struggling to keep his own station operational, quickly analyzed the readings. His reptilian face paled as he realized the horrifying truth. They shut us down." Xor turned on him. "Explain." Vlek's claws trembled over the controls. It wasn't a standard energy weapon. It was some kind of disruption field. It bypassed our shields completely. Our systems. He paused as his screen flickered back to life, now showing something even worse. "Admiral, they're hailing us." Xor's breath caught in his throat. A moment later, the main display on the bridge crackled to life. At first, the screen was filled with darkness, as though the human ship was refusing to show itself. Then a voice, calm, steady, and unerringly confident, echoed through the Zifron warship speakers. "This is Captain Isla's work of the UNS Valhalla. You have trespassed into our domain." The voice sent a chill through every Zeon officer in the room. It was not panicked, it was not afraid, it was the voice of someone who already knew they had won. Xor's throat went dry. He had never heard of the UNS Valhalla before, no intelligence reports had ever mentioned a human warship of that name, and yet there it was, an impossibility that had just rendered his entire fleet helpless in mere seconds. Captain Work continued, his tone unwavering, "Your fleet is now in our hands. Surrender or be destroyed." Silence filled the bridge. The Zeon had never been in this position before. For the first time in their history, they were the ones outmatched. Xor's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the screen, the mysterious human warship that shouldn't exist, a force he could no longer control. For the first time in his life, he felt true terror. The bridge of the Zeon flagship was dead silent. Every officer, every soldier, and even Admiral Kaller himself were frozen in place, their eyes locked on the screen where Captain Isla's work of the UNS Valhalla had just issued a chilling ultimatum: your fleet is now in our hands. Surrender or be destroyed. For the first time in Xian history, they were the ones at a disadvantage. Xor's throat felt dry as he processed the impossible situation before him. His fleet, one of the most technologically advanced and battle-hardened forces in the known galaxy, had been shut down in an instant. Their shields flickered uselessly, their weapons were disabled, and their systems were barely functioning. One human warship had done all this, and yet, despite the undeniable proof of their overwhelming power, the humans had not fired a single lethal shot. They were waiting for him to make a decision, waiting for him to choose between submission and annihilation. Xor's claws curled into fists. I would rather die than surrender. His crimson eyes flicked to his officers. Reactivate emergency systems. Bring weapons back online, whatever it takes. His second-in-command, Captain Varric, hesitated as his scales flickered with unease. Admiral, we should consider their terms. We have no idea what other weapons they have. Xor growled lowly, you want to bow to them? The great Xian Empire will not kneel to a race of primitive mammals. Varric flinched but said nothing. Xor turned back to the screen. We will not surrender, he declared coldly. Fire all remaining weapons. Destroy them. The moment the words left his mouth, the bridge erupted into action. Officers frantically bypassed damaged circuits, rerouted power, and attempted to bring their massive warships back online. Across the fleet, damaged plasma turrets flickered to life, rail batteries hummed, and missile bays opened. But it was already too late. The Valhalla had been waiting for them to make their move. Without hesitation, the human warship unleashed its first real attack. A pulse of light erupted from the Valhalla's hull. It was not a laser, it was not plasma, it was something else entirely. The Xian flagship shuddered violently as the energy wave hit, consoles exploded, sparks rained across the bridge, and officers were thrown from their stations. Xor's vision blurred as he was nearly knocked from his seat. Then the real horror began. All across the fleet, Xian warships began vanishing one by one. The massive dreadnought cruisers and battleships disappeared into thin air, no explosion, no debris, no wreckage, just gone, as if they had never existed. Xor's claws dug into his chair, his heart pounding against his ribs. Impossible. No weapon, no technology in the galaxy could do this. But the Valhalla had just done it. Before his very eyes, over half of his once mighty fleet had simply ceased to exist. And then the human captain spoke again. We warned you. His voice was calm, unshaken, as if this was nothing more than an inconvenience. The transmission flickered, and for the first time, Xor saw the Valhalla bridge. Captain Isla's work sat in his command chair, his expression unreadable. His crew moved with cold precision, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. And then Xor saw something that truly terrified him. Behind, engraved into the steel walls of the Valhalla bridge, was a single phrase in ancient human script, automatically translated by the Xian systems: Victor is not enough. We ended a war. Xor's breath hitched. This was no ordinary warship, this was a weapon built to finish wars, to eliminate enemies so thoroughly that they could never rise again. Xor's heart pounded, his vision swam. He had made a grave mistake. The Valhalla had given him a choice: surrender or be erased. He had chosen poorly, and now the Xian Empire was about to learn what it meant to fight against a power they could not comprehend. Admiral Sailor could feel his heart pounding in his chest. His breath came in short, shallow gasps as he stared at the screen before him. His once mighty fleet, the pride of the Xian Empire, was being erased from existence, not destroyed, not crippled, erased. There was nothing he could do to stop it. He turned sharply to his officers. Find a way to break their hold on us, now. The bridge crew scrambled, their clawed hands flying across flickering consoles as they desperately attempted to regain control of their systems. But every time they tried to reboot their weapons or reactivate their shields, the same message flashed across their screens in bright red letters, SEMOVRID Access DE8. It was as if the Valhalla had reached into the very core of their warship and hollowed them out. Xor gritted his teeth. This is impossible. This is beyond anything we have ever encountered before. Who were these humans? What kind of monsters have they become? He turned his gaze back to the human captain, Captain Eyeless Work, who remained perfectly calm, his expression unreadable, as if this entire battle, if it could even be called that, was nothing more than an exercise to him. Finally, the human spoke. Admiral Xor, your arrogance has cost you dearly. Your fleet is crumbling, and yet you still refuse to accept the reality before you. So tell me, what will it take for you to surrender? Xor's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. The word surrender burned in his throat. The Xian Empire had never surrendered, not once, not ever. And yet, what choice did they have? One of his officers, Captain Varric, turned to him, his face pale, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral, we are losing everything. Xor remained silent, his mind racing. Then another pulse of energy rippled from the Valhalla. The Xian flagship lurched violently, as if struck by an unseen force, consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the crew was thrown from their seats. Xor clung to his chair, his eyes wide in horror, as he saw the impossible unfold across the battlefield. The last remaining Xian warships began dissolving into nothingness, one by one, they vanished, with no explosions, no debris, just gone. His breathing became ragged, his entire fleet was being erased from reality, as if they had never existed. This wasn't just defeat, it was extermination. His vision blurred as he stared at the human warship, the monstrous creation called the Valhalla. This was no ordinary warship, this was a weapon of absolute dominance, a weapon that should not exist, and yet it did. Xor forced himself to his feet, gripping the console for support, his body trembling with rage and fear. Human, he spat. Captain Roar tilted his head slightly for the first time, his lips curled into the faintest of smiles. We are the species you should have left alone. A cold chill ran down Xor's spine. The screen flickered, new data appeared on the monitors. His officers gasped, the Valhalla was charging again, but this time it wasn't a test, it wasn't a warning, this time it was the final strike. A massive energy surge built within the Valhalla core, its hull glowing with an eerie blue light. Vlek turned to Sailor, his voice panicked. Admiral, if they fire again, there will be nothing left of us. Xor clenched his jaw, he had no choice. For the first time in his long and decorated career, he lowered his head in submission. We surrender, the words left his lips like poison. And yet, the moment they were spoken, the energy surge within the Valhalla began to fade. The ominous hum of its weapon systems dimmed. Captain Work nodded slightly. Wise choice. Xor exhaled, his body sagging with exhaustion, but deep in his heart, rage burned. The Xian Empire would not forget this humiliation, one day, they would have their revenge, they just needed to survive long enough to take it. Admiral Sailor stood frozen, his claws tightening into fists as the weight of his words sank in. We surrender. It was the most bitter phrase he had ever uttered, a moment that would be burned into his memory forever. The Xian Empire had never surrendered before, not in thousands of years, not against the greatest warlords of the Galactic Core, and yet here he stood, powerless, broken, and at the mercy of a single human warship. The bridge of his flagship was eerily silent. His officers, once full of arrogance and confidence, now sat in stunned disbelief, their faces reflecting the same humiliation burning in his chest. The human Captain Eyeless Work remained on the screen, his gaze calm and unreadable. Then he spoke again, good. Now, power down your remaining ships. If you attempt anything foolish, you won't even have time to regret it. Xor's jaw tightened, but he gave a stiff nod to his officers. One by one, the remaining Xian warships sent their surrender signals. Their weapons shut down, shields were lowered, energy cores powered down to minimum levels. The mighty Xian fleet, once a symbol of dominance and terror, was now completely helpless before the lone human warship. But work wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice steady now. "Admiral, you will send a message to your high command. You will tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that the Xian Empire has made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity." Sailor flinched, a cold shiver ran down his spine. A message to high command, the very thought filled him with dread. He knew exactly what would happen if he returned with this disgrace. The Xian High Council did not tolerate failure. His career, his honor, his life would be forfeit. But what choice did he have? The Valhalla still hovered before them, an immovable force, a nightmare made real. Swallowing his pride, Sailor turned to his communication officer. His voice was hollow, "Send the message." The officer hesitated for a brief moment, then obeyed, typing rapidly into the console. A transmission was sent back to Xian High Command, encrypted with the highest priority. But even before the message was fully transmitted, a new alert appeared on the bridge's main screen: "Incoming terrain session, ZYPH, or a high command." Xor's blood ran cold. The response had come faster than expected, too fast. A deep, powerful voice filled the bridge. "Admiral Gaylor, explain yourself now." The image of High Chancellor Ven appeared on the screen. His piercing yellow eyes were filled with fury, his face framed by dark ridges of bone that barely concealed his disgust. Behind him, the War Council of the Xian Empire sat in judgment. Xor took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "High Chancellor, I regret to inform you that our fleet has suffered a significant loss." Ven's eyes narrowed dangerously. "A loss against what?" "Reports state that you engaged a single human warship. Are you telling me you could not handle one primitive vessel?" A bitter taste filled Sailor's mouth. Primitive, the Xian had always seen humans as an inferior species, a minor, unimportant civilization that had refused to submit to the Galactic Order. And yet, the Valhalla had wiped out an entire fleet as if they were nothing. Xor forced himself to speak. "Chancellor, this was no ordinary warship. The humans, they have created something far beyond anything we have ever encountered." A murmur ran through the War Council, some scoffed while others whispered among themselves. Ven's expression remained cold. "Explain," he ordered sharply. "The Valhalla possesses weaponry unlike anything in the known galaxy. It rendered our shields useless, disabled our systems, and erased entire warships from existence with a single shot. We never stood a chance." Chaos erupted in the council chambers. "Impossible. Lies. No species has that kind of power," one council member exclaimed. "He's a coward, making excuses for his failure." Ven silenced them all with a single wave of his clawed hand. His gaze was unreadable as he stared at Xor. "You surrendered. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, one dripping with contempt." Xor's hands trembled, but he kept his voice steady. "Yes, Chancellor. It was the only way to ensure the survival of what remained of the fleet." Ven exhaled slowly, then his expression darkened. "Admiral Tazer, you are relieved of command. Return to Xian space immediately. Your actions will be judged accordingly." Xor's heart sank. He knew what that meant: he would not live to see another battle. But before he could respond, Captain Rohr, who had remained silent through the exchange, finally spoke. "Chancellor Ven, if I may, the entire Zifran War Council should consider yourselves lucky that we are not the ones judging you. Had the situation been reversed, I assure you we would not have been so merciful." Ven's eyes flared with anger. "You dare." Captain Wirt continued, his tone casual, almost mocking. "I suggest you reconsider how you deal with humanity in the future. You assumed we were weak, you assumed we were easy prey, and look where that assumption has led you." A heavy silence filled the chamber. Wirt leaned in slightly. "Now, Imagine what happens if we stop showing restraint. Ven clenched his jaw but did not respond. For the first time, the Xian Chancellor looked uncertain. Roar smirked. That's what I thought. Then, with a final nod toward Sailor, he cut the transmission. The Xian fleet was left floating in silence. Xor closed his eyes as the weight of everything crashed down upon him. The Xian Empire had been brought to its knees by a single human warship, and for the first time in their history, they were afraid. The Xian fleet remained motionless in space, suspended between the black void of the galaxy and the menacing presence of the Valhalla. In their lifeless ships, the officers and soldiers of the Xian Empire stared at their screens, unsure of what to do next. A sense of dread had taken root in the hearts of every Xian soldier. They had never felt fear like this, not since the Empire first rose to power. Admiral Coulter sat in the darkened command chair of his flagship, now completely powerless. His once proud fleet was at the mercy of the human warship. He had been stripped of his command, and soon he would be held accountable for the crushing defeat. But Sailor's personal fate was no longer his primary concern. The reality of what had just happened was dawning on him. The Zifran Empire, a civilization that had spent millennia conquering and destroying, was now facing the terrifying truth: they had underestimated humanity. The Xian officers exchanged nervous glances. They knew their emperor would demand an explanation. They knew there would be consequences for this humiliating defeat. But none of them could even begin to imagine what it meant to face an enemy like Captain Eyeless Work and his crew. Suddenly, a beep echoed through the bridge. Admiral Sailor, you are needed on the comms. Reluctantly, Xor stood and made his way to the communication station, his claws clicking on the metal floor, a sound that served as an eerie reminder of how far his empire had fallen. He stood before the communication panel, and as the screen flickered to life, the cold, mechanical voice of High Chancellor Ven echoed through the room. Admiral, I am aware of your failure. The galaxy will soon know of the Xian Empire's humiliating defeat. Xor flinched, his mind racing. This was the moment he had feared. The end of his career was all but certain. But there was more than just personal disgrace to fear. The Xian Empire itself was at risk of collapse. The Emperor's voice continued, venom laced in every word. Do you understand what you've done, jailer? You have exposed our greatest weakness to the humans. They will come for us next. We've lost our reputation, and soon we will lose our strength. Xor lowered his head, the weight of his failure crushing him. The once towering Xian Empire now faced the prospect of alien civilizations questioning their might. The fear of humanity's warship, the Valhalla, would spread like wildfire. Other species, once afraid of the Xian, would now see them as vulnerable. The loss of Xian supremacy was imminent. Then, the screen flickered once more.